Hey y'all, welcome to another video. So I just wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind lately. Maybe start a conversation, get some feedback. As you probably know, I've sort of been involved in the political conversation on YouTube and social media, Twitter, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned before, it's generally been pretty frustrating and not as enlightening and fulfilling as I'd like it to be. So sort of my response to that was just sort of move to the sidelines of the conversation and just focus on the things that I think are interesting and that I think are important. But I guess what I'm wondering is that the best way to go about it? Because in the past, I've had so many messages and emails and tweets and stuff people sent me where they say like, you kind of changed my mind on some of these things, or you explain things in a way that I've never heard explained before, or I've only watched a certain type of video on YouTube before and I had no idea that there were people making videos like what you were making. So you kind of opened my eyes to that. And I get tons of messages like that all the time. And I really like those messages and I like having that effect, and I like seeing people being able to engage with the content that I make in that way. The problem is that it gets like tiresome and frustrating to sort of cover these basic ideas like over and over forever. So basically what I mean is there's a lot of ideas that seem to be gaining steam that are just like either like factually wrong or just completely reprehensible. You know, things like the white nationalism thing, the neo-Nazi stuff, but even including ideas like the sort of anti-trans movement that's sort of come up on social media, or people spreading misleading or false statistics about black crime or crime among immigrants. And of course, all of the hatred and fear of Muslims that has been spreading even more lately than before. So there's just like a bunch of that stuff brewing. Like, I don't think it's the majority. I don't think it's the mainstream, but there's definitely like this fringe movement of just like hateful, incorrect people, and their ideas are just sort of spreading. And the thing about it is these arguments and these ideas are not hard to refute. A lot of the times they fly directly in the face of data and facts, and you can literally just point to the data and say, actually, what you're saying about those people is literally wrong. For example, there was this big hubbub in the YouTube political community about how many genders there are, which is a kind of an exhausting conversation because science is like long past the gender conversation in terms of whether or not there are two genders. Like psychologists and biologists have considered gender a spectrum for like decades now. Like it's like kind of settled. So the issue here is like, how do we tackle these ideas? There are people that argue that it's better to reiterate and educate people about these things. Like, if it's so simple to refute these ideas, then why don't you just do it? Especially because a lot of people's alternative is to be just sort of super elitist about it. It's almost like if you can't figure this basic shit out by yourself, like if you're unwilling to do literally 5 minutes of Googling to figure out that the idea you have is wrong, then I either don't trust that you're being honest about it, or you're just like too dense for me to deal with. Like, that's kind of the idea that a lot of people have. And then there are people to the extreme that just straight up say that all these people are just pure evil and they're not worth engaging to begin with. And even personally, myself, my strategy when dealing with these things, or at least my strategy like now, I don't know if it's always been like that, but the strategy now has generally been to ignore like these just overtly reprehensible ideas, because they're part of this conversation that just is very frustrating to me, doesn't make me happy, and often it seems like you're just like walking into a brick wall. But many people have argued that that is less effective than just trying to explain these things to people. Like, I've talked about this before, you definitely shouldn't expect people to just do a complete 180 overnight, but perhaps a constant exposure to facts and good ideas will gradually shift them to the right side. And I want to go ahead and say this is different from the sort of should we debate or should we platform certain people. Like, that's not this discussion. I'm mostly talking about the people who are listening to these ideas, the people who are having these conversations on YouTube and social media. I'm not talking about the public figures and the thought leaders, because that's sort of a different ball game. A lot of them, I think, are clear propagandists and really have no interest in engaging with ideas in an honest way. So that's a different conversation, which we can have at some point. But just these people that are sort of toying with these ideas, or even, fully believing these ideas. A lot of people are sort of upset with the left because of how we react to people. We just kind of turn up our nose and just like, fuck those people. Those people are insane and terrible and evil, and I don't want anything to do with them. I don't care. That sort of thing. And I guess the argument is that sort of reaction sort of emboldens them. Maybe it makes them feel like they're more right since they aren't being challenged. I don't know. So I kind of get that. But the problem is, like, my issue is, when do we get to move past those basic issues? Like, if someone's idea can be refuted by 10 minutes of Googling, how often, like, how long do we have to keep re-explaining the literal basics of these issues? When do we get to move on to interesting things that actually matter? Like, I remember when the Black Lives Matter movement was really kicking into high gear, there were all these like naysayers saying things like, well, the black people commit more crime than white people, which is like literally not true. And even if you add the nuance that black people proportionally commit more crime, that still is provably out of context. And there's so much more to talk about. But we get stuck on that first thing, that very first question of who commits more crime, when you can literally just look that up like 5 minutes. Like, how many times do I have to keep making that argument? And then we can get to the actual interesting part. That's my question. And maybe the answer to that is never. Maybe there always needs to be people who are willing to engage those entry-level questions. But it's really frustrating and tiresome. Like, we need to be past this. Like, maybe it'll take decades or centuries before we like finally understand certain things. But I don't even know, because it seems like a lot of these ideas sort of die down, but then like are reborn later. Like, someone brings up this old idea that's been debunked a million times, but they somehow rehash it. And then all of a sudden we have to go back to the basics and explain this basic shit again. So that's kind of what I've been struggling with on that particular issue. Because I've been reading a lot of like articles criticizing, the left, the progressives, and I've even criticized progressive myself on YouTube and on Twitter. I do think that sometimes there is a excessive unwillingness to engage people on the left, and this desire to sort of seek out villains and seek out traitors rather than trying to meet people in the middle or find common ground or even try to understand other people. So I get that, but I feel like there has to come a day where I don't have to explain to people anymore that all Muslims aren't terrorists. But maybe not. Maybe this is a never-ending struggle, and we just always have to be prepared to defend the truth, even if it's a basic fundamental fact that you can look up on the internet in 2 minutes. But I don't know. This is kind of a rambly, unscripted video, but that's kind of been on my mind lately. So just want to put that out there and see what you guys think. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you help someone else have a great day. And as always, stay Heiko. Thank you for watching my video. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. Ad revenue is basically not a thing anymore on this channel. Being a full-time video creator is harder than it's ever been. So if you find any value in these videos and you'd like to help me make them better and more sustainable, click or tap the Patreon logo below and become a patron. Even a pledge of $1 a month goes a super long way. So it would be amazing if you checked out my Patreon page. And I wanna take this time to thank all of my existing patrons. You are the lifeblood of this channel, literally.